The main character in Shadow of the Colossus is delusional, obsessive, and selfish. Don't believe me? Ask his girlfriend and his horse what they think. When we follow someone around for hours of gameplay, we want to trust in the nobility of their mission. In the case of Shadow of the Colossus, we like to think that Wander's quest to revive a wrongly killed woman by struggling against great foes is as honorable as can be, but when we take a real look at a perspective other than Wander's, this hope begins to fall apart. Really, it's all about him. As far as he's concerned, both Mono and Agro are possessions, and he can do with them as he pleases. Before we get directly into Wander's motives, though, it's important to point out a few things about Mono and Agro. As I pointed out in my previous analysis, names are extremely important in this game, and many aspects of Mono's name reveal a few disturbing things about her relationship to both Wander and to the player. First, it should be mentioned that, like Wander, Mono's name never appears in-game, and it minimizes her importance in much the same way that it does Wander. However, it also does something different, due to her existence as a kind of living MacGuffin. By dissociating the dead girl from any kind of connection to her former life, it takes her objectification one step further, turning her resurrection into little more than a trophy to be won. By requiring outside research to even discover the girl's name, the creators of the game alienate her from her humanity in the eyes of both Wander and the player. Okay, but what if we do the outside research and we find out her name? Does this humanize her for us? Hardly. Her name likely originates from the prefix mono, literally meaning one, single, or alone, and it carries similar meanings in Japanese. By almost literally making her name the One, she becomes removed from the rest of humanity. At best, this separation puts her on a pedestal, and at worst, it turns her into nothing more than a possession. We tend to assume the best motives from Wander, but when we take a look at the character arc of Agro, we can get a better look at how Wander treats these living possessions of his. As Wander's only companion and ally through his adventures in the Forbidden Lands, Agro holds a special place in the hearts of those of us who played the game, despite some of his more annoying qualities. Agro! When we lose him before fighting the 16th Colossus, we feel Wander's pain as he watches his friend plummet into a deep canyon. It cannot be questioned that he mourns the loss of his horse. But let's think for a moment about what that loss symbolizes to us. Wander has driven himself and his horse to their limits, and he has risked both of their lives in pursuit of his goal. In fact, his obsession even leads him to lose himself. Thus, Agro's fall is meant to show us how far Wander is willing to go when he sets his mind to something. The death of a non-human possession like Agro becomes an acceptable risk in pursuit of what he believes to be right. And it cannot be questioned that Wander thinks of Agro as little more than a possession, despite Agro's devotion to Wander. To see this, let's take a look at a name one more time. There are only two contexts in which Agro's name is used in the game. Either as a command, Agro! Or as a cry of grief. Agro! Never is it used with any tones of affection. Even when it is used with real emotion in the form of grief, this feeling is quickly shaken off in order to accomplish the task at hand. If Wander treats a treasured companion as little more than an expendable tool, albeit a tool with an extreme sentimental value, how can we expect him to treat an objectified Mono? We can say with reasonable assuredness that Wander cares little for the desires of others if they conflict with his own goals. We know that he's willing to go against his society's taboos in the pursuit of what he believes is right, and he makes a deal with a being of questionable morality. But he only does this to save Mono from an unwarranted death sentence, right? Perhaps not. We should remember that the only account of Mono's death that we get comes from Wander, so the only reason to believe that she was sacrificed due to her cursed fate is if we trust Wander. When Lord Emon sees Mono at the end of the game, his words seem almost of mourning and reverence. So she may not be as cursed as Wander leads us to believe. But this is fairly flimsy evidence, so let's assume that Wander is telling the truth and Mono was sacrificed because of a cursed fate. How then is he doing her any favors by reviving her? By forcing her to live again, is he not also burdening her with this cursed fate? And if she was sacrificed, why do we assume that it was against her will? Just because Wander opposes the religious doctrine of his society, we can't assume that Mono does as well. In fact, in the history of human sacrifice, many times being sacrificed was voluntary or even considered a great honor, as was likely the case in some Aztec human sacrifice. This would seem to explain Lord Emon's reverence. Either way, it seems unlikely that Wander's motivation is based on what he believes is best for Mono, and it is more likely that he has been driven by grief into what he does. It is exceedingly selfish, but we can at least understand and sympathize with his actions. So where does this leave us? At the game's conclusion, we see the miracles of Agro's survival and Mono's revival, and along with Wander's rebirth, we are tempted to think that we see some light in this darkness. Unfortunately, a close examination shows that, due to the willfulness of Wander, these three souls are now stranded in a faraway land and cursed to loneliness. If Wander is being honest with us, and Mono truly has a cursed fate, perhaps this was precisely the terrible future her death was meant to avoid. Perhaps, when all is done, Wander is simply the enforcer of the wicked fate's cruel game. Thanks everyone for watching. If you didn't catch last week's video on Shadow of the Colossus, go ahead and you can click the link right here in the video. Other than that, we'll be doing a different game next week, so if you want to see my take on something new and different, check us out next week, and go ahead and click on that subscribe button. Also, please feel free to tear me a new one in the comments if you think I'm wrong. You know, if you think I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about, or if you think I'm right but you still think I'm stupid, feel free anyway. So yeah, thanks again.